They called him 1 Pound Johnny or something like that. Drew a picture of him. And he was the sole survivor of the last government-sanctioned massacre of Aboriginal people in 1927. So they put him on one side and put Queen Elizabeth on the other. Of course, he didn't get any royalties. Apart from the fact that he was a false name, he's dead. Then, on the Australian $50 note, I'll leave you with this. I discovered it yesterday. I'm still having a bit of difficulty talking. Yeah, I investigated Ian Clooney's Ross. Ian Clooney's Ross was the boss of the CSIR, and then the CSIRO. He was a celebrated Australian scientist. He used to be on the $50 note with Howard Florey on the other side, who was a co-discoverer of penicillin. I'll tell you a bit about that as well. Yeah, Ian Clooney's Ross, I read years ago, used to entertain people with his imitations of bird songs. And he was the boss of the CSIRO. In 2000, he was revealed, in 1999 it might have been, by the Fairfax Press in Melbourne, that in 1945 and 1946, there was a program in remote North Queensland, orchestrated and run. There's my screen. Organized and run by the Heidelberg Military Hospital in Melbourne. And they got soldiers. They trawled the repatriation hospital for injured soldiers and Jewish refugees who weren't allowed to carry arms, who wanted to fight against the Nazis. I think they called them the Janira boys. They wouldn't give them weapons to fight the Nazis, but they convinced them to help with the war effort by becoming what the newspaper called human guinea pigs. And the third group were interned Italians. So in the remote North Queensland, so Townsville and Kansas, location, secret location, they infected these people with malaria. They used a number of techniques. They exposed them to mosquito bites, with mosquitoes that had been bred, genetically engineered, not molecularly, but bred to carry thousands of times, that's what the newspaper said, thousands of times the normal load of malaria parasites. That's what the CSIR did. That's entomological warfare, using insects as vectors to carry infectious disease. They also infused them with bags of blood infected with malaria. The bags of blood were supplied by the Red Cross. And the purpose of these experiments was to test out a drug called paludrin by Imperial Chemical Industries, ICI, that was formed in 1929, same year as the BBC. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the details. So they wanted to test out paludrin and also paracetamol. Paludrin was a British anti-malaria drug. They got the formula from the Germans. And paracetamol His name was ICI, and paracetamol was tested as well, Panadol. For Winthrop Pharmaceuticals, the American companies are still selling Panadol. That's to lower the temperature. So they didn't acknowledge how many people died. So you can't tell. I can't tell. So they weren't interested in stopping malaria in the colonies. They only wanted to protect the soldiers. It was the same, that was the Second World War. That was the same with penicillin. My father's mentor, Max Rosenheim, who selected him and trained him, used to have control of penicillin and used to give it to people that he favored. It was supposed to be only for the soldiers. A single injection of penicillin is a cure for syphilis, which is a big problem. But as people who have investigated or know about the Tuskegee experiment in the USA, they denied African Americans the single injection that would have cured syphilis, because the white people wanted to observe the progression of the disease. I've known about that for 30 years. A lot of people are just discovering it now. So ICI, shortly after this story was broken by Fairfax Press, so the Murdoch Press, which is the only alternative, didn't take up the story, never does. So what happened is that shortly after this human guinea pig story was publicized by Fairfax, the Age newspaper, I think Sydney Morning Herald as well. Yeah, ICI split its explosives and mining operations and paints, which is Orica, Dulux, and a few others. They became one company called Orica, and the pharmaceutical operations, ICI pharmaceutical operations became AstraZeneca, AZ. AstraZeneca was a collusion between the British and the Scandinavians, and that's who made the British version of the COVID vaccine. AstraZeneca in collusion with Oxford University. Oxford. And there's the role. I was telling you about Clooney's. Ian Clooney's Ross. He was the boss of the CSIR at that time, but it's not mentioned on the internet at all. And then he became boss of the CSIRO, the Commonwealth Scientific and Research Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization. That's who introduced cane toads. Introduced cane toads to get rid of a beetle that was eating the sugarcane. The sugarcane plantations were planted by a guy called Towns, Robert Towns. That's what Towns is named after. And he was a slaver. He was a slave. He kidnapped Melanesian boys on Solomon Islands and the Torres Strait. When they came out to his boat in canoes, he threw a net over them, hauled them in, pushed them down into the hold and brought them to work as slaves. He didn't call it slaving. He called it blackbirding. Blackbirding. And the slaves that they brought were called kanakas. Kanaka means boy. Yeah boy, yeah boy. Kanaka. A lot of people don't know this history. I didn't either, I wasn't taught it. I learned it because I wanted to know what really happened. I read John Pilger's book back in around 1995 or so. A Secret Country. That's where I found out about the strychnine. Yeah, terrible. They used to hunt Aboriginal people for sport. Hunt them for sport. Yes, so Francis Galton has a street named after him in Holland Park, from the suburbs in Brisbane. I was supposed to go to the Holland Park Magistrates Court again on Friday because the Brisbane City Council wants to take out an enforcement order against me. They're saying that my property is a public health risk, my garden, because it's overgrown, it has weeds and breeding sites for mosquitoes. So as I said, the CSRO bred mosquitoes that carried thousands of times the normal load of malaria parasites. Ian Clooney's Ross was a parasitologist, a vet. A vet, his expertise in parasites. And Ian Clooney's Ross and Frank McFarlane Burnett, who won the Nobel Prize in 1960, and Frank Fenner, who died a few years ago. They were all biological warfare experts. Biological warfare. Clooney's Ross he trained in tropical medicine in London. That's where my father studied tropical medicine, but as I said before, tropical medicine is a euphemism for biological warfare because they wanted to prevent their soldiers from getting malaria and kill their enemies with malaria. They also use smallpox, as a lot of people know. They use influenza, they use measles, they use cholera, they use typhoid, and they're very interested, in fact used, African hemorrhagic fevers. It started with Lassa fever, that's the natural one. And they made Marburg virus. Marburg is city in Germany. Marburg virus and Ebola virus that was made by the Belgians. They credited with the discovery of Ebola virus by Peter Piot. I used to call him Pio because I thought that's how the French name was pronounced. But he himself calls it Piot. And he got COVID. There's a reason for that, I'll tell you later. My Prince Charles got COVID as well. And Donald Trump. Yeah. Peter Pio is credited with the discovery of Ebola virus. It is an African hemorrhagic fever. Then, after the death of Jonathan Mann, who used to wear a bow tie, after the death of Jonathan Mann, in a plane crash, he was flying to Switzerland, I think it's for a World Health Organization conference. His plane was down. He died. And Peter Piot got his job. Yeah, so Peter Piot is now one of the bosses of the London School of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. Changed its name, or changed its name to London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Yeah, so this is the biological warfare headquarters of the British Empire. And it's run, like all these institutes, by the Freemasons. Now Prince Philip, who died recently, was the Grand Master of the Freemasons. Or UGLE, UGLE, United Grand Lodge of England. It used to be the Grand United Lodge of Free and Ancient Masons, but they're not united anymore because there was a union between the Scottish Freemasons and the British Freemasons. The Scottish Rite, that's RIT, and the English Rite, represented by red and blue. That was in 1717, in a tavern in England, in London. So it was called the Grand United Lodge of Free and Ancient Masons that became Grand United Lodge of Free and Ancient Masons, a more modern word. And then the Grand United Lodge of Free and Accepted Masons. Now it's become the United Grand Lodge of England. And in Queensland we have the United Grand Lodge of Queensland. It had its headquarters built in Ann Street, named after Queen Anne, in 1930. There are more than 50 lodges in Brisbane. But they control the judiciary, the police, the military, and the government. That's why David Hurley, I've asked lots of people who they think who the Governor General is, and the policeman didn't know. Didn't know who the Attorney General was either. But his name is David Hurley, and he was a general in the army. And he was in charge of what they call Operation Solace. And Australian troops were sent to the Horn of Africa. They call it the Horn of Africa. East Africa, Somalia, Sudan, Ethiopia, Eritrea, used to be Abyssinia and Nubia, Nubians. Yeah, so David Hurley was in charge of that, and he's the patron of the Grand, of the, what's it called? The Royal Freemasons Benevolent Institute. They're only benevolent to other Freemasons, they're not benevolent to us. My grandfather, Windsor Algaratan, was initiated as a Mason. He left the organization, he wouldn't talk about it, he was scared to. But I went to Masonic schools. Masonic schools in Sri Lanka and Australia, but I didn't know there were Masonic schools. Church of England.